Jump back in time to the summer of 2024 when BioWare released the trailer for their next Dragonage installment, but it wasn't called Dragonage Dreadwolf anymore, it was called Dragonage the Veilguard. I felt so exhilarated watching this new trailer as I had not seen BioWare put out an update since we had seen the trailers for when the game had Dreadwolf in the title. I mean, it had been almost a decade since I was left feeling like I had a hole ripped out of me from finishing Inquisition the first time, and then that same feeling over and over with my different replays of Inquisition. I'll be honest, there was a time after the Dreadwolf trailers were released that I did not think that Dragon Age 4 would ever see the light of day, that we would never know what happened to Solus, or the Inquisition, or the Inquisitor, or Hawk, or maybe even our hero of Ferelden. We would never see the storyline over these 3 games continue, and where the next adventure would be, or the next location to explore in this vast world that had been built. As a longtime Dragon Age fan whose first introduction into this series was Dragon Age Origins, and who also has over 260 hours played in Dragon Age Inquisition, you could imagine my excitement when BioWare made the announcement of diving back into the Dragon Age world with the announcement of Dragon Age Dreadwolf. And you can also imagine my excitement when we got a first look at Solus again after the shock of the cliffhanger that was left coming off of the Trespasser DLC from Inquisition. You can also imagine my dismay when I saw all of the pushback that the first Veilguard trailer received from the internet. I played over 70 hours of Dragon Age the Veilguard, completed all of the side quests that the game offered, and explored basically every inch of all of the maps. And if I could describe the game in its entirety with one word, it would be underwhelming. I went into Dragon Age the Veilguard with not many expectations, mainly because it had been almost 10 years since the release of the last game, and if you're someone that has also enjoyed and played the Mass Effect series like myself, we all know the shitstorm that came along with Mass Effect Andromeda. So my expectations were not high, but they also weren't low. But like any AAA title that has been released in the last few years, I knew not to expect much, but I still couldn't help but be disappointed by the time I finished the game in its entirety. In this video, I'm going to break down the game and just give my thoughts as both the person that loves video games and as a fan of BioWare and the Dragon Age world. I'm going to go into things that I loved about this game and also things that I did not love about this game. I'm a firm believer that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and this is just my opinion that I wanted to put out there for anyone that is a Dragon Age fan that maybe needs some validation on how they're feeling about the game itself or BioWare in general. I know for me personally, I've listened to a lot of different opinions and thoughts about the game from a variety of people that either hated the game or absolutely loved it. This video review will contain spoilers, so please, if you haven't played the game and are wanting to play the game and do not want to be spoiled, do not continue watching. Also, I need to apologize in advance if there is poor quality of the Veilguard gameplay throughout this video. I'm not sure if anyone else playing had to lower their graphics settings to the lowest the game had to offer, but I had to when I went back to record gameplay footage, and honestly, I did not care enough about this game to try and figure out how to make it look good for this video. So, with that being said, let's jump into Dragon Age the Veilguard. I want to first start with the character creator that Dragon Age the Veilguard has to offer. The first time I used the character creator for Dragon Age the Veilguard, I spent almost 2 hours creating my character, and by the time I was maybe 20 minutes into actual gameplay, I absolutely hated the way my rook had looked. I actually ended up completely starting a new game and recreating my character because I felt like maybe I had missed some options in the creator that made my character look weird or off almost. I don't know if it was maybe the initial excitement of just playing a new Dragon Age game or the fact that it took me 2 hours to create my rook, and at that point I just wanted to play the actual game. When I initially started playing the game the first time, I just was not happy with the way my character had looked. It was only after I went back into the character creator the second time, I felt like I had a better handle on what I was actually doing with the slider options, but I still wasn't completely satisfied with the way my rook came out. And at that point, I just accepted it because I just wanted to move on and play the game. I think one thing that irks me the most about this character creator is that almost every single rook I create looks the same. I don't know if this is just user error on my part, or maybe someone out there feels the same way and has dealt with the same issue, but I believe that this issue is because they only give so many default head options in the beginning and not many options for actual different facial features. I think limiting the player to only 6 preset head options adds onto the player truly not being able to connect with the character that they create, which is one of the main issues that I had with this game. I felt like I never once connected with my rook in this game, and part of the reason why I feel that is that I was never truly satisfied with the way my rook had turned out. So when different cutscenes came up where my rook has dialogue, in my mind I understood like, hey, that's my rook that I created, but it never truly felt to me that this was my main character that I created. For me, the best part of any type of RPG game where you get to create a character is the character creator. Cyberpunk 2077 does a really great job giving the player so many options of eyes, heads, nose, makeup, piercings. Even Dragonage Inquisition gave a lot of different facial feature options. Though we do know the hairstyle options were an obvious miss, I was still able to create a character that looked different every time. I felt that even with the sliders that are included for Veilguard for the different facial features, you're still only left with a handful of actual options to choose from. Some sliders felt like they did absolutely nothing, and other sliders could easily take your character from looking one way to completely different the next. I mean, honestly, why are there so many complexions but no eye options or lip options? Another thing that I wish they would have added more detail into was the actual model of rook and allowing a player to choose their rook as more feminine or masculine. It's plainly obvious why they basically chose a standard model for every rook character to be similar to that standard character model, so they wouldn't have to code the different armors to fit actual different body models. Case in point is that even Qunnaris are very similar to the standard character model that Veilguard has to offer, when in previous games like Inquisition, the Qunari has a completely different body model to what an elf would have, or even a human. Considering how gender and inclusivity was such a hot topic surrounding this game, you would think that they would include more in actual body types and allow the player to choose for their character to either look more feminine or masculine. I will say that I am happy about the array of different hairstyles that we were given. However, I do still think the actual options are somewhat lacking still. I think I was just expecting more, especially after learning about the insane hair physics that the devs worked on. But once again, it feels as though there are a bunch of shorter hairstyles over the 4 longer version hairstyles that we get. Overall, it just once again feels like another Dragon Age character creator where I'm going to end up using mods to get more options to choose from for my character. Other than those few things that kind of bothered me about the character creator, I do feel that it's very innovative. I do think that the different categories that they list everything under, specifically like where you edit your face, your hair, your eyes, felt a little weird to me when going through the actual screens. I think that they could have done this and organized this a little bit better in the way that Inquisition has done it in the past, or even Origins has done that. To me, it just felt like it was done so in a way to confuse the player. And to add on to that, one more thing I wanted to point out for the character creator is customizing the Inquisitor. Including the option to edit your Inquisitor was a solid choice in this. However, it feels almost hidden to the player where they chose to include the option to edit your Inquisitor from Inquisition. They add the option to the finalized screen, and at this point, I think most players would see that screen and be ready to move on and start the game. I know that this is more specific to those that have played Inquisition, but I definitely think that this should have been its own separate page in the character creator and not on the finalized screen before you actually start the game. I've seen a few people say that they started the game and realized later on from other players that you could edit and customize your Inquisitor. And again, the options that included customizing your Inquisitor, I felt pretty much the same about customizing my Rook. I would have loved to see more variations of options that are from Dragon Age Inquisition, whether that be a signature hairstyle, or an outfit, eye and lip options that we get from Inquisition, just to make our Inquisitor feel more like and look like our Inquisitor from Inquisition. Overall, I generally didn't mind the combat, and at times I found it to be actually fun. I always end up choosing Rogue when it's an option for these types of games, and I honestly had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoyed the different animation movements when dodging an attack, or even making the final blow to an enemy. The combat wheel was also pretty nifty, but I do wish we had more options for specialty skills to choose from while in combat. I know a lot of people talk about how spongy the enemies are during combat if you have a higher difficulty on, which causes the combat to be drawn out and boring, but I usually play at a normal difficulty because most of the time when I'm playing an RPG, it's because I want to play for RPG elements in the story and not the combat. I did notice that as I began to upgrade my different skills in the skill tree and even respec some of my skills, the combat was becoming easier and quicker. Although I did think it was fun, by the time I was nearing the end of Act 1, I was starting to feel run down by all of the different side quests, and at that point, I just wanted to run through the combat as quickly as I could to move on to the next quest, so I ended up lowering the combat settings. Even on a normal difficulty, the combat started becoming repetitive and boring, and towards the end of Act 1, I found myself becoming annoyed, and I had no desire to even pay attention to what was going on in my rook's surroundings at that point. Again, I just wanted to move on and continue the storyline. Like I said, I'm not a stickler when it comes to combat for RPG games, and I mostly just play for the story elements, but I did enjoy the combat that Veilguard had to offer. The environments created were absolutely phenomenal and so beautiful, and I believe it's one of the strongest assets the game has to offer. Veilguard has some of the most astonishing environments I have played, and quite possibly the best out of all of the Dragon Age games. That being said, the environments were also bland and unmotivating when it came to actual exploration. I am someone that will explore every inch of a map that is offered in a game just so I can find hidden loot or little details that a dev may have left behind to be discovered, but this game did not offer that. There are no mysteries to discover or weird phenomena to stumble across. In fact, there is no life to the environments whatsoever. The only time you may find some loot is through a side quest. And even then, a lot of the quests have you coming back to the same part of a map multiple different times, which in turn makes going to those same places tedious. I found myself using the fast travel option rather than actually exploring the environment to get where I need to go for an actual quest. One specific thing that I loved about Inquisition is while exploring, you come across different journal or codex entries that further the lore, or maps to different places where you could find hidden treasure, or even puzzles that would keep your attention and flawlessly allow the player to actually want to explore the map of a location. The crossroads were interesting, but knowing that Dragonage the Veilguard was going to be a live service prior to them switching to a singular storyline, I can see exactly what the crossroads was going to be originally used for, as a hub for everyone to meet. I definitely feel like the devs spent a lot and possibly the majority of their time here, and you can tell because going back to my main point about the environments feeling like they have no life to them, the crossroads actually made me want to explore. If not only for the promise of seeing more into Solas's backstory, but all of the spirits gathered here and returning back to the crossroads as you progress into the story and complete quest lines. Just like with the combat, I don't have much more to say about the actual environments or the world building because honestly, there isn't much to say. You can tell the devs spent a lot of time honing in on making the environments beautiful, but the lack of giving the player the opportunity to discover made these maps feel lifeless to explore and tedious when having to come back to the same area multiple times for a side quest. I'm gonna be straight up about the storyline here and just say right off the bat that the storytelling was not the greatest that bioware had to offer, especially in the lineup of previous RPG games that they have produced. I mean, I have never skipped through so much dialogue in a game before because I truly did not care for what the characters had to say. And this is coming from someone that will sit through all the dialogue again and again through replays of Origins and Inquisition and even Mass Effect. This storyline is one of the major issues that I have with this game. BioWare games are known for and infamous for their storytelling and storyline, so I was expecting Dragonage the Veilguard to also provide a storyline that would completely suck me in and make me want to stay up all hours of the night just to see what happens next. But honestly, the only reason I kept playing was just to see what would happen with Solus. And man, what a complete and utter slap in the face when I realized that Solus, who I thought was going to be our main antagonist, ended up being cast aside completely and quite literally. There is such a deep well in Solus's character that the writers could have used for in this game, and choosing to shelve him as a side character was such a pitiful decision. Maybe the writers felt overwhelmed or intimidated because of this, but you had 10 years to figure out how he would shape the rest of the story. I think the focus on the companion stories over the overall storyline was the game's biggest downfall here. I don't want to play a game solely focusing on the companions. I want to know, what was Solus up to the last 10 years? What about the Inquisitor? Have they been searching for Solus too? Pushing out the Inquisitor, Morgan, Varric, and especially Solus, who this game should have been about, was a poor choice for the writers. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed getting to know a new cast of companions, but choosing to focus on the companions over the story that fans had been waiting forever to see continued on was just unfortunate. I truly thought we would see more of Solus, but he was mostly cast to the wayside, which was a complete disappointment. The entire Inquisition storyline completely builds up to the twist that we get in Trespasser, leading the player to believe that whatever comes next, it's going to be about Solus. When they announced the game as Dreadwolf, we knew what the game was going to be about, especially if you played Inquisition. Dragonage Dreadwolf was going to be made for the fans. When they re-announced the game as the Veilguard, I became suspicious and a bit cautious, but still open-minded. However, Dragonage the Veilguard was not made for the fans, but for a new, younger audience. I can honestly say that the game was not at all what I was expecting it to be. Because of all of this, I truly believe that continuing on as the Inquisitor would have been a much better choice for this game. I think even with the same storyline in place that is in Veilguard, if we were to play as the Inquisitor, it would have made way more sense than playing as a completely new character. I mean, why give the player the option to create and customize your Inquisitor if they're only going to be in the game for roughly 3 or 4 scenes? What was the point? To me, this felt like a breadcrumb for fans of the game series, along with including Morgan as Mythal in a botched plastic surgery version of Dorian. And I'll be completely honest, it fooled me as I was playing. I got excited when I came across Morgan again for the first time in Veilguard, and I about jumped out of my chair when I heard Dorian's voice. But again, that moment was so fleeting when I realized that this was all we would see and hear from them. Just more breadcrumbs for starving fans. Choosing the ending to release Solus from Mythal's service is a great example of this. Finally, bringing the Inquisitor and Solus back together for their happy ending was just a nice little bow tie on a steaming pile of crap writing for everything that these two went through in Inquisition. And don't get me wrong, I sobbed when I heard the Trespasser Lost Elf theme again playing in the background while the scene unfolds between Solus and the Inquisitor finally meeting again after so many years. And although I was elated that these two characters finally got their happy ending, I couldn't help but feel as though I wanted more of their story for this game. The writing here felt so weak, and if you played Inquisition, you knew exactly the tormented feeling that is left when choosing to romance Solus. Anyone that romanced Solus in Inquisition was definitely expecting more in this game. I know I was. I also want to talk about the pacing of the different acts in the game that just felt off to me. Act 1 was way too long of an act, as the majority of the companion side quests are housed here. Towards the end of Act 1, it was all companion side quests, one after the other, and it was starting to become repetitive and boring. The beginning of Act 1 for me was very solid and the pacing was great, but then somewhere along the middle, it just felt like the writers didn't know where to go with the story, so they just filled it with a bunch of companion side quests. Every companion side quest had the exact same structure where each one had their own enemy that they needed to fight and then win over to be able to work through their own personal issues. I remember just skipping through a lot of the dialogue towards the end of Act 1 because I was starting to become a little agitated when I would end a side quest for a companion, go check the map, and see that there was another side quest waiting for me for the same companion. It was becoming a pain point for me, and I just wanted to move on to the main quest, but I was unsure that if I did the main quest, would those side quests just disappear? All of the companion side quests being thrown at you at the end of Act 1 just took me out of the main storyline completely, and I kept asking myself if I was even playing the same game. I mean, we had fought one of the elven gods already, but we were still in Act 1. Once I finally hit Act 2, I felt that the story was moving along great again, and it was starting to feel like we were actually getting back to the main storyline. But then as soon as Act 2 started, it felt like it ended. And then I was in Act 3, and then the game was over. There should have been some divide of the companion side quests in Act 2 just to make the pacing a bit better. The last thing I want to touch on with the storyline is the overall writing. I've seen a lot of commentary about how it felt like HR was in the room when talking about the writing, and I have to agree. The writing was very poor in this Dragonage game. I was expecting much more. There was no creativity in the dialogue between characters, and the dialogue was way too modern, especially playing a fantasy-like RPG game. I mean, there is a dialogue choice that the player can choose that is just oof. Like the word oof. This type of modern language in a fantasy game is such an inferior choice and just shows a general lack of creativity from the writers. It also conveys that this game is written for a much younger audience and to essentially make it easy for the player to understand. I mean, I have never skipped through so much dialogue in a Dragonage game before just to get through a side quest that I really had no interest in and found incredibly boring. This unfortunate writing and dialogue took away from my experience and connection to the game. Since we're on the subject of writing and dialogue, I also want to talk a little about the characters and companions for a minute. I want to start off by saying that I was truly excited to meet a new cast of characters for this game. I was also expecting that we would see some returning characters from the previous game, besides Morgan and a brief visit from Dorian and the Inquisitor. That being said, the majority, if not all, companions from this game are completely forgettable. This pairs along with the unfortunate writing in that all of the characters are just surface level and have no depth to them. This also includes Morgan, Solus, Varric, and yes, even the main character, Rook. I don't think I've ever played an RPG before where I have felt absolutely no connection to my main character that I am controlling. It could very well be the lack of the decisions you get to make in this game, but it also has to do with the fact that your side companions are looked at as more important than your main character. Rook's sole purpose in this game is to help the companions through their issues and to bring everyone together to fight the enemy. There are no decisions that you specifically make as Rook that affect the outcome of the game. The decisions you make for your companion's final side quest do absolutely nothing for the game's outcome either. None of the choices that you make as Rook matter. This is why the Inquisitor should have been our main character for this game. It is a character that many fans have made a connection with already, and I know for myself, it would have made playing this game just that much better. Rook was not a necessary character for this game, but I can blatantly see that bioware does this on purpose, because they want to continue with the Dragonage series, but only with this new lore and world that they've built on in Veilguard. That is the only reason why we hardly see the Inquisitor, and why Solus was cast to the wayside as a side character, but still given a happy ending with a little bow tie on top. And even then, calling that ending a happy ending is not saying much. The happy ending choice was a pitiful attempt to keep fans happy. I honestly don't have much more to say about the companions because there is nothing to say about them. They are surface level companions, and the way all of the characters are written do not give me a reason to actually care about them. I think some companions like Emmerich and Nev were interesting and had some really great potential to go more in depth with their characters. But companions like Davrin and even Lucanus, who probably would have the most interesting storyline considering being a crow and having a literal demon attached to him, just fell so short in terms of storytelling. Even the romances, which, let's be honest, for myself and probably a lot of other players, we're most excited to see who we could romance and how and what that would look like, ended up being lackluster and dull. And again, I keep harping at the fact that BioWare is pandering towards a younger audience with this game, and the romances are one of the ways they show this. I guess I'm just not understanding why cater to this younger audience when your older audience are the ones that have been playing your games for years. We hardly see the companions in conflict with each other either, and if they are in conflict with each other, they make up super quickly. And even still, the side quests between characters to show that they were at odds with each other really didn't show that at all and felt so misplaced in this game. One specific scene between Harding and Emmerich deciding on what they should bring with them to go camping, and Rourke has to intervene and talk to them like they are children. First off, is the world not on the brink of ending because of two gods at the moment? Why are we going camping in the middle of an apocalypse almost? Secondly, why is Rourke the one to try and make these two companions make amends with each other? Why, as the player, are we forced to make sure that all of the companions are friends? The companions being superficial is another reason I will not pick up this game again. None of the dialogue they offer makes me interested in going back and listening to them speak again. The writers had a solid baseline for all of these characters. The lack of creativity for their storytelling of each of these characters was indifferent and disappointing. I was already worried when it was announced that only 3 choices from the previous games would carry over, but when I saw what the actual choices were that carried over, I was incredibly disappointed. Who your Inquisitor romance in Inquisition, if you vowed to stop or save Solus, and if the Inquisition disbanded or was given over to the Chantry, which I don't even understand keeping this choice if the Veilguard didn't even have a focus on the Chantry whatsoever. But what about other major choices from Inquisition? Who became the new Divine? Who ended up drinking from the Well of Sorrows? Who became Ethal's quote-unquote new form? It would either be Morrigan or your Inquisitor would be tied to an elven god, which this entire game focuses itself around. Why would they not make this choice count? Yeah, sure, BioWare can make whatever they choose as canon, but then what is the point of this being an RPG game? What is the point of having the past 3 games that allows the player to set the entire storyline that would lead up to the next game? And if you've romanced anyone other than Dorian or Solus, what was the point of adding in the other romance choices to bring into this game from Inquisition? So the Inquisitor, who is hardly in the game themselves, can maybe bring it up once and that would satisfy fans apparently? To me, this was just giving long-term fans a little crumb in hopes that maybe we would see more past characters besides just Dorian, who doesn't even look like Dorian. The way that BioWare boasted about this game was going to be a story that relied on player choices heavily throughout, and all you really get is one actual choice to make throughout the entire game that only caused one of the faction cities to be destroyed, and then the companion from that city becomes hardened, and then after a while, you could win back their friendship and everything is completely fine. Why even have this companion be hardened? Again, what's the point of this choice if that companion's storyline isn't affected at the end of the game? Other than this main choice, you get a few more decisions that don't even affect any of the storyline whatsoever. Where are these big RPG elements that they told us would be in this game? I will say, the choices that you make towards the end of the game when planning the battle and deciding where the different companions would be during battle were actually interesting. However, your path here goes 2 ways. All of your companions live because you did all of their side quests and made friends with them, or all of your companions die because you didn't do their side quests or make friends with them. In the previous games, there are plenty of side quests with companions where you can lose a companion based on a choice you make, or you could tell a companion to just leave if you wanted because you didn't like them or you didn't like their way of thinking or opinions. I so wish I could have done that to a few characters in Veilguard. But seriously, who are they kidding themselves by saying this game is comparable to Baldur's Gate 3? And I know, I get it. I don't want to be comparing this game to Baldur's Gate 3 because Baldur's Gate 3 is in a league of its own. But did BioWare even play their game? To say that they didn't want to use the Keep, where all of the player choices from previous games were kept because the technology was outdated, was such BS. And then just blatantly rewriting the lore from the previous 3 games just shows that they did not care what those previous games offered. After my first and really only playthrough of Dragonage Veilguard, I thought about going back for a second playthrough with a different character, and halfway through creating my character for for it, I thought to myself that my gameplay and choices would still be the same either way during this playthrough, so why did playing the game even matter? None of the choices I made would shape the story at all, and I then found myself uninstalling it and wanting to go back and play Inquisition or Baldur's Gate 3 again. And the only reason I reinstalled Dragonage the Veilguard was to do this video and have my own gameplay footage in the background, and even then, I just ended up using my rook from my first playthrough for the background to this video by accessing my different saves from when I played, because I honestly did not want to sit through another playthrough of this just to get to the ending again. I want to touch on the response from the devs of the game just a little bit, because as a fan, I am disheartened to hear and see some of the things that the devs have put out there in interviews and on their social media. Firstly, the dev Reddit AMA was disappointing to read because devs were completely ignoring any question or comments regarding plot holes, lore, and the narrative of the game overall. The devs making promises that we will see past choices from previous games make an impact in future games. Why not this game? What makes this game different than future games where past choices should have mattered? Considering the writers completely skipped over and even rewrote some of the lore and Veilguard, this tells me that this is just them making empty promises to give fans hope and have them play any future games that they make for this series, which in hindsight was such a poor decision, because just look at the sales for this game and the number of concurrent players. Now let's see how many people are playing it right now. Oh god. December 31st, 2024, 8,468 people in this game. The game has been out for 2 months. 2 months. The devs are allowed to be part of this game, and they should be. There was a lot of hard work put into the game, and the game itself is fun, but the lack of accountability towards criticism of this game and chalking it up to YouTubers being the reason it failed is absurd. After my first playthrough of Dragonage the Veilguard, I thought about going back for a second playthrough with a different character, and halfway through creating my character for it, I thought to myself that the gameplay and choices would still be the same either way during this playthrough, so why did playing the game even matter? And then I found myself uninstalling it and wanting to go back and play Inquisition again. For context, I've done 4 playthroughs of Origins and at least 6 of Inquisition. Halfway through the Veilguard, I found myself wanting to go back to Inquisition or even Baldur's Gate 3. I was really hoping that the Veilguard was going to be a game that I could replay throughout the winter, but then also revisit, but I don't see myself playing this game again, unfortunately. The game is not personal to the player. Dragonage the Veilguard by itself is a genuinely good game, and I did find myself having fun with it at the beginning, but I wouldn't consider this a Dragon Age game. Personally, I think the game falls short with lack of actual choices that affect the gameplay throughout, and just never feeling a connection with my playable character as the main character. Rook is supposed to be this main character that connects all of these factions together to fight these big bad gods, but it feels more like I'm there to make all of the companions be friends with each other. This game was not written for Dragon Age fans who have played Origins, Dragon Age 2, or Inquisition, and then subsequently waited 10 years for this disappointment. Dragonage the Veilguard was made for a modern, younger audience, and to include more than just the actual fans that have played the Dragon Age series for years. They gave us crumbs to satisfy what players were hoping or wanting from this game, which is such a sad way to treat longtime fans that have supported the company this long. You can tell this game was specifically made so that bioware can start something completely new, and we all knew this because at the very end we see a text screen that tells us that the Veilguard will be back, and honestly, when I saw that, I wasn't excited about it. To completely disregard the story that's been in place and the choices players have made from the first 3 games was a slap in the face to all of the fans that have supported BioWare to continue the story that we all yearned for 10 years ago. To say I'm disappointed in what we were given is an understatement. At this point, I can't say I'm excited to see what else BioWare is developing in the future, especially with the potential future state of Mass Effect 5. I know for certain that I won't be pre-ordering like I did with Dragon Age the Veilguard.